Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take on a mountain of information, financial reports, legal documents, and corporate histories, and distill the critical knowledge you need to be well-informed.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into an organization that, despite its massive shadow across American life, often remains, well, pretty much invisible to the public.
And that company is Cencora.
It truly is the invisible giant of the global pharmaceutical world. If you, the listener, have picked up a prescription recently, whether a simple generic or a complex biologic, there's about a 1 in 5 chance that Cencora, or its former iteration, AmeriSourceBergen, handled the logistics of getting that pill or vial to your pharmacy or hospital bed.
So our mission today is really to pull back that curtain.
Exactly. We're going to unpack its history, understand the immense operational muscle that generates hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue, and critically confront the history of controversies, including the massive legal settlements that ultimately forced this company to undergo a complete rebranding.
Okay, so let's just start right there with the scale, because it's hard to wrap your head around. We are talking about a critical component of the S&P 500.
A huge component.
A logistics company so vast that its predicted 2025 revenue figure is, what, US $321 billion?
That's the projection, $321 billion.
I mean, that is a number that is approaching the gross domestic product of an entire developed nation, not just a distributor's annual sales.
That scale is why they matter so much. They don't invent the drugs, but they control the flow. And that control, coupled with that financial history, is why we have to start with the rebranding.
Right, so they weren't always Cencora.
No, not at all. The company officially transitioned from AmeriSourceBergen Corporation to Cencora on August 30, 2023.
And what's fascinating here is that our source material explicitly links this identity shift, which is an incredibly expensive and complex undertaking for a global giant, to the severe fallout from the American Opioid Epidemic.
That's the critical piece of context we need to hold on to throughout this discussion. You just don't spend that kind of money on a name change for no reason.
It's a strategic move.
It's a massive strategic move. A corporate name change of this magnitude, it almost always serves a clear purpose: to create distance between the current operating entity and a controversial past dominated by legal risk and, frankly, negative public association.
So the business itself doesn't change.
The underlying business, the assets, the operational model, all of that remains the same, but the public-facing identity attempts to signal a clean slate, a fresh start.
So we start with this immediate dual identity. Cencora as the essential backbone of the medical supply chain and a firm intrinsically linked to one of the greatest public health crises in modern American history.
A difficult balancing act, to say the least.
So what is the fundamental business model that drives this $321 billion machine?
Is it as simple as just filling prescriptions?
No, their role is far more specialized and pervasive than that. Their core business is really twofold.
First, they are a massive drug wholesaler and distributor. They are the crucial high-volume logistics layer that moves products from the manufacturer, think Pfizer or Merck, to the healthcare provider, like a CVS or the Mayo Clinic.
They're the middleman, the super efficient giant middleman.
The essential middleman. And second, and this is really important for their profit margins, they operate as a contract research organization, or CRO.
What does that entail?
They offer highly specialized services, consulting, data analytics, all to the biopharmaceutical industry. So they don't just move the product, they actually help design the path the product takes from the lab to the patient.
That financial power, that massive revenue projection, it has to be built on a pretty solid foundation. Let's rewind to the beginning and look at how this behemoth was actually constructed.
Yeah, that's the right place to start. The current structure, the structure that existed for 20 years under the name AmeriSourceBergen, was formally created in 2001.
And it was a merger, right?
A huge one. It was the result of a massive merger between two already large, powerful pharmaceutical distribution entities, AmeriSource Health Corporation and Bergen Brunswig Corporation.
So this wasn't just a simple consolidation. It was a major move toward concentrating power in the market. Why merge two giants instead of just trying to outcompete each other?
In the pharmaceutical distribution sector, efficiency and scale are everything. Absolutely everything.
Okay, why is that?
The profit margins on any individual drug delivery are, I mean, they're razor thin. We're talking pennies or maybe low single-digit percentages. It's a volume game.
So to make any real money, you have to move an unbelievable amount of product.
Unimaginable volume, and you have to drive down your operational costs relentlessly. So by merging AmeriSource and Bergen Brunswig, they did two things immediately. First, they eliminated a major competitor.
Right.
And second, they gained massive negotiating leverage with both the manufacturers and the providers. They could realize huge cost efficiencies by streamlining their logistics networks, closing redundant warehouses, that kind of thing.
So that single action fundamentally reshaped the competitive landscape of U.S. drug distribution.
It really did. It was a foundational moment for the oligopoly we see today.
And we should probably note the leadership continuity that guided this process. Our source details that David Yost was the CEO of AmeriSource before the merger.
And he maintained the top position after the two companies combined, which is pretty key.
Why is that so important?
Well, that kind of leadership tenure provides necessary stability during what is an incredibly complex integration phase. Merging two companies this size is a nightmare of logistics and culture clash.
Right, so he steered the ship.
He did before he was eventually succeeded by Stephen Collins in 2011, who later became chairman.
Okay, so the executive leadership stabilized this newly formed giant. It's headquartered in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, and it trades on the NYSE under the ticker COR.
Yes, but as we established earlier, Conshohocken is just the corporate home base, the actual operational muscle that spans the entire globe.
This is where the sheer physical scale really comes into focus. I mean, to process 20% of the entire U.S. pharmaceutical volume, you need more than just a large warehouse.
Oh, much more.
We need to dive into the distribution network that's described in our sources.
The footprint is vast, and it's highly diversified. Domestically, they run 26 traditional pharmaceutical distribution centers across the U.S.
26.
And that's not all. They also operate 9 distribution centers up in Canada. These are the workhorses, managing the fast-moving generics and the high-volume brand-name drugs, day in, day out.
But the strategy is also built on specialization, which I assume often means higher margins.
Exactly. That's where the real money is. They run 4 dedicated specialty distribution centers in the U.S.
And what makes them a specialty?
These facilities are distinct because they handle products that require very strict temperature controls, specialized handling, or complex regulatory compliance.
So we're talking about things like expensive cancer drugs.
Right. Expensive biologics, gene therapies, certain vaccines, things that can't just be thrown on a truck. This specialization allows them to move beyond general distribution into the high-value, fast-growing segments of the drug market.
And their infrastructure goes beyond just basic warehousing.
Yeah.
They also provide value-added services like packaging and repackaging.
Which requires a significant physical presence of its own.
How significant?
They possess over 1 million square feet of packaging production capacity, and that's split between the U.S. and the U.K.
1 million square feet just for packaging.
Yeah, and this highlights a crucial function. They're converting bulk manufactured product into the precise, ready-to-use formats needed by hospitals and small pharmacies.
So like smaller unit doses or specialized kits.
Exactly. This isn't passive logistics, it's active supply chain engineering. They're adding value at every step.
But the true global leap, the move that really changed them from a North American giant into a worldwide logistics power, that seems to be the acquisition of World Courier in 2012.
Oh, that was absolutely a game changer, not just for them, but for the entire biopharmaceutical sector.
It was a $520 million acquisition.
It was. And World Courier is described in our source as the largest specialty courier company in the world. So it didn't just add a shipping department to their business.
It was more than that.
So much more. It integrated a certified, complex, international temperature-controlled logistics network directly into Cencora's system. They bought the best in the world at what they do.
And why is that capability so critical, especially for modern pharmaceuticals?
Modern medicine, particularly in fields like oncology, rare diseases, gene therapies, it relies heavily on complex biologics that have to maintain precise temperatures.
The cold chain?
The cold chain, exactly. We're talking often below freezing from the moment they leave the manufacturer until they reach the patient. Any deviation, any temperature change, and the drug is compromised.
And you've wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Or more. So World Courier provided the infrastructure, over 150 company-owned offices globally, trained personnel, specialized packaging, to manage this cold chain across multiple international borders seamlessly and reliably. This acquisition cemented Cencora as an indispensable partner for companies developing the absolute cutting edge of medicine.
And all of that massive scale is managed through 4 distinct business units. It shows how they compartmentalize the diverse risks and services.
Yes, and these units really reflect their core business segregation. First, you have the AmeriSourceBergen Drug Corporation, or ABDC.
That's the main engine.
That's the high-volume engine, your core drug distribution. Then you have the AmeriSourceBergen Specialty Group, ABSG.
And that's focused on those high-touch, expensive drugs we just talked about.
Right, often working directly with patient assistance programs and things like that. Third is AmeriSourceBergen Consulting Services, ABCS.
The advisory arm.
The advisory arm, yeah. Providing data, analytics, business services to manufacturers and providers. And finally, you have World Courier, the global cold chain specialty transport provider.
It's a structure that ensures they can maximize efficiency in low-margin generics while capturing those really high margins in specialty services.
It's a very, very smart structure.
When you have this much market power, your relationships with other giants in the industry become, well, they become symbiotic. The most significant tie noted in the source is that deep connection with Walgreens Boots Alliance.
That relationship is absolutely critical to understanding Cencora's financial and operational strategy. Walgreens Boots Alliance owns 10% of the company, according to the 2025 financial update.
10%.
But back in 2016, Walgreens exercised an option to purchase 15% of the stock. So while the ownership percentage has shifted a bit, this initial agreement demonstrates a powerful mutually vested interest between one of the world's largest distributors and one of the world's largest retail pharmacy chains.
So for Walgreens, it secures the supply chain. They know they'll get their product.
It locks it in. And for Cencora, it guarantees massive, steady, predictable volume. It's a win-win at that scale.
And looking at their history of acquisitions, it shows this pattern of relentless market consolidation and diversification into adjacent high-margin fields. It really is a roadmap for cornering the entire distribution market.
You can trace that roadmap very clearly. In 2015, they diversified, buying MWI Veterinary for $2.5 billion.
Okay, so why veterinary medicine? That seems like a bit of a left turn.
It's actually a very smart hedge. Animal health is generally less regulated than human health. It often has higher margins, and it provides a stable revenue stream that's completely divorced from the specific pressures of the human pharmaceutical market.
So if there's a big political fight about human drug pricing, their vet business is insulated.
Completely insulated. It's a smart portfolio move.
Then in the same year, 2015, they focused on specialized pharmacy services. They agreed to buy the compounding drug company PharMEDium for $2.58 billion.
Right. And compounding, for those who don't know, involves creating custom medications for individual patients. It's a high-skill, high-margin activity.
So by integrating that capacity, they're controlling not just the movement of standard drugs, but also the creation of custom ones.
They own another piece of the value chain.
And the focus returned to core distribution consolidation in 2018.
That's when they acquired H.D. Smith. And the source notes that H.D. Smith was the largest privately held national pharmaceutical wholesaler in the U.S.
So this move was crucial.
It was huge. In a market that's already concentrated among really 4 major players, taking out the largest independent competitor eliminates a major source of pricing pressure and strengthens the oligopoly that dominates American drug distribution.
Fewer players means less competition.
Much less.
And their final massive move noted in our sources was in 2021, acquiring Alliance Healthcare from their primary shareholder, Walgreens, for about $6.5 billion.
That's right.
How did acquiring an international wholesaler from a company that already owns a large stake in UBEN benefit the structure? Seems a bit circular.
It was highly strategic, and it had 2 main benefits. First, it was a massive cash injection for Walgreens, which strengthened their financial position. And a strong Walgreens benefits Cencora indirectly as a major shareholder and customer.
Okay, that makes sense.
But second, and more importantly for Cencora's structure, it dramatically enhanced their international presence, especially in Europe. It further globalized their operational reach to handle standard drugs as well as specialty drugs on a global scale.
So the deal essentially traded ownership for operational scale.
Exactly. And it was paid for through a combination of $6.275 billion in cash and 2 million shares of AmeriSourceBergen common stock.
What's fascinating here is that the acquisition strategy isn't about rapid, chaotic growth. It's methodical.
It's very systematic. It's about building an interconnected, resilient distribution ecosystem that is nearly impossible to disrupt because it handles every single segment of the chain: core distribution, global specialty logistics, custom compounding, and vet medicine.
Okay, let's pivot now to the immense daily function of this ecosystem. What exactly is flowing through those 26 U.S. distribution centers, and who relies on it?
The product portfolio is designed to be completely comprehensive. It covers the standard requirements of almost every healthcare provider you can imagine.
So the basics.
The basics, which is the sheer volume engine. Their offerings include the distribution of both generic and brand name pharmaceuticals, but they also handle essential items like over-the-counter healthcare products and home healthcare supplies and equipment.
And as we touched on earlier, they're not just selling goods, they're selling the expertise required to manage these goods efficiently.
Absolutely. The consulting arm is a significant value add and, a big profit center. They provide advisory services related to medical business operations, reimbursement, patient services.
So they help hospitals and pharmacies run their businesses better.
They do. And this includes highly specialized logistics and administrative services for complex areas like long-term care facilities, workers' compensation programs, and the delicate management of high-cost specialty drug patients. They make the complex administrative burden of modern medicine manageable for providers.
So if they sell everything, who buys it? Who relies on Cencora to literally stock their shelves?
When we say everyone, we really do mean everyone who is dispensing or administering medicine.
So not just the big chains.
Not at all. Their distribution reaches every level of the system. Acute care hospitals and major integrated health systems, independent pharmacies, which we can talk more about, as well as the major chain retail pharmacies like Walgreens,
And beyond that.
specialized mail-order facilities, individual physician practices and clinics, and critical alternate sites like nursing homes and assisted living centers. They truly are the circulatory system of healthcare.
This brings us back to the most critical data point that illustrates their influence, which is that 20% market share figure.
This is the figure that defines their market power. AmerisourceBergen, now Cencora, handles about 20% of all of the pharmaceuticals sold and distributed throughout the United States.
Let's just sit with that for a second. 20%. 1 out of every 5 prescriptions.
1/5 of the nation's prescriptions, treatments, and life-saving drugs rely on their specific infrastructure, their trucks, their warehouses, their people.
What does that kind of concentrated market share translate to in terms of real-world power?
It translates into immense leverage, particularly in negotiating drug prices and setting the terms for distribution. When you have basically 4 companies that collectively control virtually all drug distribution, they become unavoidable.
For who?
For both manufacturers seeking market access and for providers needing a predictable supply. You can't get around them.
And that explains their Fortune 500 ranking.
It does. It explains why AmerisourceBergen was ranked 10th on the Fortune 500 list in 2020. That scale ensures they are not just a business, they are a systemic necessity. If Cencora were to shut down for a day, 20% of the U.S. medicine supply would stop moving, period.
That concentration means that any operational decision they make, whether it's about efficiency or ethics, has immediate, nationwide public health consequences.
The stakes are incredibly high.
It's also important to note how they structure the independent market segment, which is still so crucial to community healthcare. You said they control that through the Good Neighbor Pharmacy Network.
That's right. It's a very clever model.
But this isn't a direct chain of ownership like a CVS, is it? It's an affiliation model.
Correct. The Good Neighbor Pharmacy Network is technically a retailer's cooperative. It's comprised of over 3,400 independently owned and operated pharmacies.
So they're still small business owners.
They are, but Cencora, as the sponsor and owner of the network name, provides crucial support. They are the backbone.
So an independent pharmacy maintains its local ownership and identity, but it gets the logistical and economic advantages of being tied to a massive distributor.
Precisely. In a world dominated by giants like Walgreens and CVS, the independent pharmacy needs that scale just to survive. Cencora provides the massive purchasing power that results in competitive drug prices.
And the logistics.
High-quality logistics, branding support, everything that allows these 3,400-plus small businesses to compete effectively.
The source mentions they sponsor the network's annual trade show, ThoughtSpot.
which just reinforces this deep integration. They are the economic and logistical framework that keeps the entire independent pharmacy sector viable. It's a mechanism for control and collaboration, all within a single ecosystem.
To fully grasp the critical, almost utility-like function Cencora plays, we really need to analyze a moment when the government relied entirely on their infrastructure.
And that would be the distribution of Remdesivir during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right. This incident, from back in June 2020, it seems to confirm Cencora's status as essential national infrastructure.
Without a doubt. Remdesivir, manufactured by Gilead, was at the time the first major drug authorized to treat coronavirus patients. It was an incredibly scarce, high-demand, and potentially life-saving resource.
So the government realized that standard market distribution, just letting hospitals order it, would lead to absolute chaos, hoarding, inequity.
It would have been a disaster. So they needed a centrally controlled allocation system. That's why the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS, stepped in.
And they struck a very specific arrangement with Gilead.
They did. But crucially, they needed a logistics expert who could execute a highly complex, systematic distribution plan across 50 states and thousands of facilities simultaneously, and they chose AmeriSourceBergen.
So Cencora was tasked with translating a government allocation strategy into actual physical drug movement.
Yes. The source details that AmerisourceBergen worked hand-in-hand with HHS and state governments to allocate shipments of Remdesivir vials to American hospitals all the way through the end of September 2020.
And this wasn't a standard fulfillment job. It wasn't just ship this box to this address.
Not even close. This required real-time coordination with state health departments to ensure that the allocation was proportional to local need and infection rates, not just a hospital's purchasing power.
And the stakes were massive. This was defining the national response to the pandemic.
The terms of the agreement confirmed the magnitude. In exchange for paying the manufacturer's wholesale acquisition price, American patients were guaranteed access to over 90% of Gilead's projected output during that time frame.
90%.
Which amounted to more than 500,000 treatment courses. The successful execution of this mobilization demonstrated that Cencora's infrastructure was considered reliable, secure, and widespread enough to handle a critical national public health operation.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. This entire process shows that when rapid, systematic, and controlled delivery of a scarce, temperature-sensitive drug is required, the U.S. government turns to the highly consolidated private logistics system.
It underscores the ultimate paradox of this company. The government depends on the operational efficiency, scale, and proven track record of companies like Cencora to save lives during a crisis.
They function as a critical utility.
They do. It confirms that their immense scale is absolutely necessary for modern disaster response and public health mobilization. But this level of utility and dependency carries an immense specific responsibility when the crisis shifts, a shift we saw so tragically with the opioids.
That pivot is unavoidable. The immense operational reach and crucial function of Cencora cannot be discussed without confronting the history of severe legal scrutiny and financial penalties.
This is the history of AmeriSourceBergen, and it is the primary catalyst for the new Cencora identity.
We have to dissect these controversies impartially and factually, drawing directly from the allegations and settlements detailed in our sources. The sheer volume of legal risk really defines the company's history in the last decade.
It really does.
Let's start with the devastating impact of the opioid crisis, which first brought major scrutiny to the distributor's role. This began early, and notably in West Virginia.
West Virginia was ground zero for the crisis, and AmeriSourceBergen was among several distributors sued by local governments there.
And what was the core allegation?
The core allegation was that these companies contributed directly to the epidemic by systematically shipping inordinate amounts of pain medication into the state, just flooding these small communities.
So these were the foundational lawsuits arguing that the distributors had a duty to monitor and halt suspicious orders.
And that their failure to do so, their failure to raise a red flag, led to mass addiction.
The legal theory behind those state-level actions evolved pretty rapidly. In December 2019, Michigan pushed the legal envelope significantly.
Michigan became the first state to sue AmeriSourceBergen and 3 other major distributors by explicitly invoking the Michigan Drug Dealer Liability Act.
The Drug Dealer Liability Act. That sounds aggressive.
It was a highly aggressive legal theory. It sought to completely redefine the distributor's role. The claim wasn't just that they were negligent in their duties.
What was the claim then?
The claim was that by failing to monitor and flag suspicious, Massive orders flowing into small communities, the distributors transformed from neutral logistics providers into co-conspirators, that they were effectively acting as drug dealers by knowingly enabling the illicit market.
These local suits created immense pressure, and that led to the first major financial compromises.
That's right. Cencora, along with 3 other companies, agreed relatively early on to pay $260 million just to settle with 2 bellwether Ohio counties, Cuyahoga and Summit.
So why settle so early?
Well, these settlements demonstrated that the distributors recognized the need to quantify and mitigate their risk. They knew that juries might be highly sympathetic to the local government's claims of devastation in their communities.
And the numbers cited in the lawsuits were often used to illustrate just how this saturation occurred in specific places. The Oklahoma lawsuit from May 2020 provides a particularly stark example.
It's a shocking example.
Okay.
Oklahoma's suit against AmeriSourceBergen, Cardinal Health, and McKesson alleged that the 3 companies combined provided enough opioids to Bryan County that every adult resident there could have had 144 hydrocodone tablets.
144 pills for every single adult in the county.
Yes. That level of saturation is used to underscore the catastrophic failure of the distributor systems to flag and halt those shipments. It moves the abstract discussion of volume into a very stark human reality.
The ultimate outcome of all this widespread legal risk was the massive 2022 national settlement.
This was the defining multi-party legal compromise. It was designed to staunch the bleeding across the entire country. In January 2022, AmeriSourceBergen, McKesson, Cardinal Health, and Johnson & Johnson agreed to a staggering $26 billion settlement.
And the scope of this deal was almost unimaginable.
It covered 46 states, Washington, D.C., and roughly 90% of municipal governments. Basically, the vast majority of litigants.
And the significance here isn't just the sheer size of the payment.
No, it's the liability they avoided. The source notes that had these states and localities actually gone to trial, the potential total penalties were estimated to be up to $95 billion.
$95 billion.
So the $26 billion master settlement agreement was essentially a negotiated compromise. It provided long-term funding for remediation programs while giving the companies definitive financial closure against most of those pending claims.
It's important to clarify what that money is legally intended for. Where does it go?
The funds from these master settlement agreements are generally directed by the states and localities toward remediation efforts.
So things like treatment centers.
Exactly. Funding addiction treatment centers, public education campaigns, opioid court systems, and law enforcement efforts aimed at curbing the crisis. This money represents an effort to manage the immense damage caused.
But there's a crucial note here.
A very crucial note. AmeriSourceBergen and the other companies involved did not admit any wrongdoing as part of this civil deal.
So they paid $26 billion, but admitted no fault.
Correct. And despite that massive settlement being intended to cover state and local claims, the legal scrutiny did not end there.
Right. The federal government was still involved.
Yes, the federal government maintained a separate legal interest. In 2022, the United States Department of Justice filed its own lawsuit against AmeriSourceBergen.
What was their allegation?
They alleged that the company distributed opioids that were later resold illegally. This just illustrates that the systemic issues uncovered were grave enough to warrant continued pursuit by federal authorities separate from that multi-state civil compromise.
While the opioid litigation really drove the rebranding, Cencora's history includes another catastrophic legal liability, this one involving cancer drugs.
That's right.
We need to go into extensive detail on the 2018 civil fraud settlement involving what was called the Prefilled Syringe Program, or PFS Program.
This case, it reveals a profound failure of corporate governance and a systematic scheme that prioritized profit over patient safety for over a decade. In October 2018, AmeriSourceBergen agreed to pay a $625 million civil fraud settlement, and the charges were comprehensive. Repackaging and selling adulterated drugs, double billing government healthcare programs, and providing unlawful kickbacks to physicians.
And if we combine this $625 million civil settlement with the previous $260 million payment for a related misdemeanor, the total financial penalty for this specific scheme was over $885 million.
That's right, almost $1 billion.
This wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a sophisticated operation spanning over 13 years.
Let's detail the specifics of this PFS program, which ran from 2001 to 2014. The program was run by 2 ABC subsidiaries, MII and OSC, and their purpose was to create, pack, and ship millions of these pre-filled syringes directly to oncology practices.
So they were going to some of the most vulnerable patients imaginable, those undergoing cancer treatment.
The most vulnerable. And the method they used, harvesting overfill, is the core of the adulteration charge.
Okay, so how did this dangerous practice actually work?
It relies on a known factor in pharmaceutical packaging. Most drug vials contain a small excess volume or overfill to ensure that a nurse or doctor can always draw out the precise dose reliably.
Right, a little extra just in case.
Exactly. The ABC subsidiary, MII, which was located in Alabama, adopted a systematic process where they would deliberately remove the drug product from the original manufacturer's sterile glass vials.
So they weren't using the drug as intended right out of the vial. They were consolidating the contents.
They were pooling it. They would pool the contents of multiple original vials, including that overfill volume, into untested plastic containers.
Untested plastic containers.
Untested. Then they would repackage this pooled, consolidated drug into their own proprietary syringes. And that pooling process, moving a drug product out of the manufacturer's sterile, FDA-regulated environment into unvalidated containers, that resulted in the charge of selling adulterated drugs and unapproved new drugs.
The crucial issue here is the loss of sterility assurance and traceability. Why is that pooling process so dangerous?
When a drug leaves the manufacturer's vial, it leaves the certified, controlled environment that was designed specifically to prevent microbial contamination. Pooling drug products from multiple vials into an untested plastic container severely compromises that sterility.
And it destroys the chain of custody.
It completely destroys it. If a batch was later found to be ineffective or contaminated, it would be impossible to trace which original manufacturer's vial it came from, or which specific patient received compromised medication. This failure endangered thousands of cancer patients whose immune systems were already severely weakened.
And the incentive, once again, was purely financial gain.
The profit motive was immense. By harvesting the overfill, ABC effectively created more saleable doses than they had actually paid for.
They're creating inventory out of thin air.
Out of thin air. They also avoided having to fully open some of the original glass vials. Those unopened vials could then be sold to other customers and to their own distribution subsidiary, ABDC, for resale at full price.
So how much did they make from this?
The sources estimate that the total profit generated from the PFS program over its 13-year run was at least $99.6 million.
So they were manufacturing a fraudulent product worth nearly $100 million in profit, all by compromising the integrity of chemotherapy drugs. But the scheme also leveraged billing fraud.
That's right. The mechanics of the scheme enabled ABC to bill multiple healthcare providers for drug portions that all originated from a single manufacturer's vial.
Which then got passed on to the government.
Exactly. This caused some of those providers to subsequently bill federal healthcare programs, Medicare and Medicaid, for the same vial more than once. This constituted direct fraud against the U.S. government and the American taxpayer.
And this fed back into their overall business strategy. It allowed them to gain market share through leveraged pricing.
Yes. By creating this massive, high-margin secondary stream of profitable, questionably sourced syringes, ABC could afford to offer deep product discounts on their entire portfolio of oncology drugs.
So they used the profits from the scheme to undercut competitors on legitimate products.
That's the playbook. This leveraged pricing was designed to lock in new customers and retain existing ones who purchased their full range of ABC services. It increased their dominance in the lucrative oncology distribution market, all built on a foundation of compromised product integrity.
Perhaps the most shocking detail, for me, relates to the attempt to conceal this program internally.
The source notes that ABC deliberately excluded the entire PFS program from its standard regulatory audit and pedigree compliance programs.
They put a wall around it.
A complete wall. For a company that specializes in regulatory compliance and logistics integrity, to wall off a program handling life-saving and life-threatening medications for over a decade. It represents a profound, systemic, ethical failure that allowed this scheme to continue completely unchecked.
And the public impact was clear. Approximately 57% of the patients injected with these syringes were federal healthcare program beneficiaries.
Which means government-backed programs paid for the compromised product, and the patients themselves were highly vulnerable individuals.
Finally, we should briefly acknowledge a more contemporary risk that all massive centralized infrastructure faces: cyber vulnerability.
Yes, in May 2024, Cencora disclosed that it had experienced a significant cyber incident. In the 21st century, being a good steward of the supply chain isn't just about moving physical boxes.
It's about protecting the data surrounding those boxes.
Precisely.
And the impact was severe.
The source confirms that the breach resulted in the exposure of patient health information. Given Cencora's role in distributing sensitive specialty drugs and managing patient services, they hold vast amounts of personally identifiable and highly sensitive medical data.
So a breach of this scale adds another layer of public responsibility.
It does. And it reinforces that centralization, while incredibly efficient, also concentrates risk, whether that risk is legal, ethical, or in this case, digital.
As we conclude this deep dive into Cencora, we are left trying to reconcile this fundamental tension that really defines the company.
It's a huge tension.
On one hand, Cencora is an indispensable engine of modern medicine. It was a trusted partner for distributing crisis medicine like Remdesivir, and it moves 1/5 of all U.S. pharmaceuticals, keeping the entire system afloat.
Yet that essential status is permanently linked to these immense legal and ethical liabilities. The multi-billion-dollar opioid settlements, which signal a failure to control diversion and volume, and the $885 million penalty for systematic civil fraud involving the adulteration and fraudulent billing of chemotherapy medications.
So the name change to Cencora attempts to create a new narrative.
It does, but the history of AmeriSourceBergen and the scale of the alleged harm, that remains central to its identity.
When we connect the sheer financial scale of the company, U.S. $321 billion in annual revenue and total assets of $76.6 billion, with the near $30 billion in cumulative penalties they've faced, what does this tell us about the stakes?
It tells us two key things. First, that in a high-volume, low-margin environment, the temptation to engage in schemes like the PFS fraud, which are designed to siphon off profit, is immense. And the subsequent harm, when magnified across 20% of the market, necessitates these astronomical penalties.
And the second thing.
Second, it demonstrates that the cost of doing business in a highly concentrated, regulated environment includes systemic risk. These penalties are the price paid for operational failures on a continental scale. The logistics layer of healthcare is where the pursuit of extreme efficiency meets the absolute requirement of public safety.
The consolidation we've described, the formation of this behemoth, the acquisition of competitors, the integration of global specialty logistics, that was all driven by efficiency and market dominance.
And that consolidation is where the ultimate question lies. Given that massive, consolidated distributors like Cencora are arguably necessary for the sheer complexity and efficiency of modern healthcare logistics, we cannot logistically revert to a fragmented system. The only path forward is through rigorous oversight.
So what level of responsibility must we, as a society, assign to the logistics layer of the healthcare system? When a company controls 1/5 of the nation's drug supply, its operational choices become, by extension, public health decisions.
That is the critical tension. How can regulation and internal corporate governance be structured to ensure that maximizing supply chain efficiency, which is necessary to keep costs low and deliveries fast, doesn't create a systemic conflict with public safety and ethical distribution practices? The future of healthcare relies as much on the integrity of the distributors as it does on the genius of the drug developers. That is the challenging dynamic Cencora and all of us must continue to navigate.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Cencora. We'll catch you next time for more essential insights.